It was a humid evening, the kind of late afternoon when the air felt heavy and the sun, though beginning its slow descent, still blazed against the asphalt roads. Cars moved sluggishly in traffic, horns blared occasionally, and the faint smell of roasted corn from a nearby street vendor wafted into the air. Among the drivers caught in this endless stretch of red lights and waiting engines sat a man named Daniel. Daniel was in his mid-30s, neatly dressed in a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his tie loosened after a long day at the office. He drummed his fingers against the steering wheel as his car inched forward. His mind wandered between the deadlines he had to meet at work and the argument he'd had with his girlfriend that morning. Life felt like a constant rush, a never-ending chase for something he couldn't quite define. The traffic light turned red again, halting the cars in a long line. Daniel sighed in frustration, glanced at the digital clock on his dashboard, and muttered under his breath about being late. That's when he noticed her. On the sidewalk just a few feet away stood a thin woman in tattered clothes. Her hair was tangled, her face partially shadowed by the setting sun, and in her hand, she clutched a paper cup. She stepped hesitantly toward the cars, her eyes scanning the drivers with quiet desperation. Some people deliberately avoided her gaze, others rolled up their windows, pretending she didn't exist. Daniel wasn't new to this sight. Beggars often roamed the intersections, knocking on windows, holding up signs, asking for change. Most days, he looked away, convincing himself that giving a coin or two wouldn't change their life. But something about this woman pulled at him. Maybe it was the way she lingered by his car, not knocking, not speaking, just staring with a faint glimmer of hope that someone might notice her humanity. He reached into his pocket, feeling for some spare change. His fingers brushed against a few coins, and he hesitated. Part of him wanted to ignore her, to focus on the traffic light, to keep the window up like everyone else. But another part of him whispered, "Open the window." Just once. So he did. The sound of the glass rolling down startled the woman. She turned her head toward him slowly, and their eyes met. Daniel held out the coins, ready to drop them into her paper cup. But before he could, his hand froze midair. His heart skipped a beat. He had seen that face before. For a split second, time seemed to stop. The woman's features were worn, her cheeks hollow, her lips chapped, but beneath the dirt and exhaustion, Daniel recognized her. His mind scrambled to make sense of what he was seeing. This couldn't be real. It wasn't possible. "Maria," he whispered, his voice trembling. The woman's eyes widened, and tears welled instantly. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she simply nodded, her whole body shaking. Daniel's chest tightened, his throat went dry. Memories he had long buried came flooding back with an intensity that left him breathless. Maria wasn't just anyone. She was his childhood friend, the girl who used to sit beside him in class, the neighbor who played hopscotch on the street, the one who once shared her dreams of becoming a doctor. And now, here she was, standing outside his car window, reduced to begging for spare change. The coins slipped from Daniel's hand into the cup, clinking loudly, but neither of them paid attention. The light turned green, and the cars behind honked impatiently. Still, Daniel couldn't move. His eyes remained locked on Maria, his mind racing. "Pull over," Maria finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Without thinking, Daniel swerved his car toward the side of the road. Ignoring the angry drivers behind him, he parked and quickly stepped out, his legs shaky as he approached her. Up close, the sight of her broke him even more. Her once bright eyes were dulled by years of hardship, her once radiant smile replaced by trembling lips. "Maria, what happened to you?" he asked, his voice cracking. She lowered her gaze, clutching the cup to her chest as though it were her only shield. For a moment, she seemed too ashamed to answer. But then, with a deep breath, she lifted her head and spoke, her words carrying the weight of 1,000 untold stories. "Life happened, Daniel, and I lost everything." He stared at her, stunned. How could someone so full of life, someone who once brimmed with ambition and hope, have fallen so far? His heart ached with questions, but more than that, with guilt. How many years had passed since he'd last thought of her? How many times had he walked through life oblivious to her suffering? Daniel motioned for her to follow him to a nearby bench under the shade of a tree. She hesitated, glancing nervously at the people around, but eventually sat down beside him. And there, as the city bustled on around them, Maria began to share her story.